You don't want to get done and have this great church or this great ministry or this great run at a company, and your kids don't even know anything about you. So have somebody in your life holding you accountable to that, because that is the saddest thing.
Welcome to the Darren Early Wine Podcast, where we awaken you to become who you were born to be. Here's your host, Darren Earlywine.
What do you do if you don't fit in life in general? It's a tough journey. Can you say junior high? Hello, welcome back to episode 19 of the Darren Early Wine Podcast. So glad that you have downloaded this, whether you're watching on YouTube, listening on Spotify, or whatever podcast platform you use. So excited to give you guys this episode and to be able to chat a little bit when we come back from our interview with a good friend of mine, Jeff Jennings. Jeff is a architect, owns his own architectural firm, but he's also a lead pastor at a church in Sacramento, California. Really, really interesting setup of him stepping into becoming who he was born to be in a very unique way. And my prayer for this episode is that it expands your imagination for what living out your calling could look like. You may have a limited imagination, maybe even a deficit of imagination of what God would or could do in your life if you trusted him with everything, all the good stuff, the calling and everything. And I hope today's episode really, really helps in that fashion. I want to thank those of you that donated on Giving Tuesday and helped us reach our goal. We met our $20,000 matching grant, and that was huge. It allows us to keep going on as a mission through 2021. And I can't thank you guys enough, those that joined us in the giving campaign. It means the world to us. And so thank you so much. Thank you also for those that have liked and subscribed or left reviews, whether it's on YouTube or the other platforms. And if you want to follow me closer, you can just do that on Instagram or Facebook. Just search my name, and I'd love to see you out there in all of the socials. Today, guys, we're going to kick in this idea, and I want you to just kind of think about this, is what do you do when you don't fit in? And what does it feel like when you finally get to a place of feeling like you have permission to say, you know what, it's okay being me? And I've got teenage sons, and just watching teenagers, I mean, if there's ever a time in life that you begin to feel those first kind of like growing pains physically, but even more than that, like trying to figure out where you fit in. Like, am I in that crew, or am I like those people? And that can create so much angst and drive us to really do peculiar, I can't say that word, peculiar things. It makes me think about, I was just actually out in Wyoming, in Jackson, Wyoming, and beautiful, beautiful scenery out there. And my wife and I go into this little T-shirt shop, and there's this teenage girl that's working the counter, and she was very hard to miss because she was really trying to figure out, I think, where she fit in the world, because half of her hair was like burnt orange and red, and the other half of her hair was jet black. And she had jet black lipstick on and jet black eyeliner and eyeshadow and a huge pentagram earrings. And so I was like, I'm not sure are you trying to be like, are you the devil, or is like half your hair like the angels? Or it was confusing. And I was thinking, what would drive somebody to get to the place where they decide, you know what, I'm going to put half my head this color, half this. And then like, I think I want to see if we can mess around with the occult a little bit. And I thought, you know what, here's somebody trying to figure out where they fit. And when you don't know where you fit, when you don't feel like you have permission to be you, it can drive you to do crazy things. And I hope this girl in Wyoming figures out who God's created to be, and I hope she realizes that messing around with the occult and stuff like that is not going to work out well for her. But for you, it may be less extreme. It probably is less extreme. For you, it may be a little bit like Bob Dylan. I love Bob Dylan's quote where he said that I was born a long way from where I belong, and I am on my way home. And that may be where you're at, is you say, you know what, I feel like I kind of have this sense of calling, of desire. I have this direction I want to go, but no one around me is like that, or no one around me is encouraging me in that journey. And that may be where you are. And as you listen to Jeff's interview, I hope that it's a process that begins to bring you on your way home. That quote from Bob Dylan, he said he was born in, I believe he was born in Minnesota. And he was like, I was just born in the wrong place, right? I was born a long way from where I belong. And for him, he felt like he belonged in New York City, and eventually found himself there, and he became Bob Dylan. I don't know if you become Bob Dylan, but my hope is that you do find your way home to becoming Nope, wrong button. Wasn't supposed to be applause. Although I would applaud for you if you found your way home. I meant to put the intro music. My hope is that you find your way home to become who you're born to be. And let's jump into the interview with Jeff Jennings, great friend of mine. Like I said, he is a lead pastor of a church in Sacramento called Faithful Legacy Church. He's also the founder and the CEO president of J Plus Designs, an architectural firm. He's a dad, he's a grandpa, and you're going to love this interview with Jeff Jennings right here on the Darren Earlywine podcast. Hey, I'm excited to sit down today with one of my mentors, a man that I love, have respected for a long time, and you're going to be inspired by the interview that you're about to listen to here with Jeff Jennings. Jeff, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me, bud. It's good to see you. You heard the word mentor. I wasn't thinking that was one of the words, but I'll take it.
Well, dude, Jeff, you have been in and out of my life for a long time and in different roles. I mean, when I was very early getting involved in ministry and doing music ministry and camps, you know, we crossed paths, and then just kind of in that context for quite some time. And then you extended an offer for me to come out and be as a part of the staff of the church that you pastor in Sacramento, California. And we almost did that, and we've just stayed connected. And we're going to unpack a little bit or a lot bit of our interview of just your journey into a very unique ministry role and sense of calling. And I'm excited to get into it, Jeff, because, and we've talked about this a ton, is we have the terminology in the church, right? Talking about being called into ministry. And I think we have a really small paradigm, a very small window that we think that looks like. And you've lived a life to really expand that understanding. And I think there are going to be so many people listening to this episode who have sensed and know that there is a call on their life. And I believe that we're all called, right? I mean, the Ephesians tells us that, you know, we need to live worthy of our calling because we've all been called by God. But
yes,
expand that understanding and the definition, and you've done that. And so I'm excited to get into the story, man. So Jeff, you are the president, CEO, and founder of J Plus Architecture, and you're an architect by trade, correct?
Yeah, I am.
How many years have you?
My Monday through Fridays doing that.
Yeah, and how many years have you been running J Plus?
I was partnered in another firm, and then in 2005 I started J Plus Architects. Just got things flying just in time for 2008 to show up and slow the whole world down. So yeah,
great timing.
So this October 5th will be my 15 years since I opened it. So
the crazy part, Jeff, is that if I give you our full title, right? You're founder, CEO. You founded and run J Plus, but you're also the lead pastor of a local church, Faith Legacy Church in Sacramento, California, and you've been the lead pastor there for how many years now?
Since 2008. So right, the same time frame during the infamous crash. Just took over a church as everything slowed down. So yeah, 12 years I've been doing that. So my wife and I, in a sense, we co-pastor it, but I take on that title of lead pastor. Yeah.
Yeah. So just that, and that'll be kind of, we'll just set the table there. That, you know, when have you ever heard of someone who runs an architectural firm and is a lead pastor of a church? That doesn't seem to make sense. And I think most people, Jeff, would be like, well, that's impossible. There's no way you could actually do that. You have to do one or the other. You can't, experience both ends. And we're going to get into your story of how you got there. But if I would have gone back, and we do this all the time on the podcast, we go back to the beginnings, right? If we go back to Jeff Jennings, the 10-year-old, 12-year-old kid, when you're starting to dream about your life, would you have ever believed that you would have been an architect and a lead pastor at the same time?
Oh, no. I definitely didn't see myself being a lead pastor. I could have seen maybe the architecture side of it, but having a call to this level of serving in the church like this, no. My parents were great laymen of the church, and that's what I always figured I'd be one of them,
Yeah. So take us back to growing up. I mean, you grew up in the church your whole life?
Yeah, my folks got saved I'm 56. I was born in 63. My folks got saved in 62.
Okay.
And I have two sisters and a brother, all a lot older than me. And so they always say, you had a different mom and dad than we had. But my parents were all in. They were born again. And so I spent most of my life, Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, throughout the week, in the church, being a part of the church, growing up in the church. So it was a big part of my life. And I watched my parents modeled what I feel still to this day is great churchmen, just people who loved the church and loved the pastor and, supported that role.
What did your dad do?
My dad was a truck driver. Yeah, he drove truck for Barber Transportation. So worked on the dock. So he blue collar, worked his tail off, union guy his whole life. So yeah, so he had a heart attack at 48 and eventually heart failure caused his death in 1995. So lost him way too young. I was in my early 30s when he passed. So my mom worked at a utility company. So yeah. So
you saw that from growing up. They were dedicated to their church. They had what you could say a secular, job, if you want to say that. But you kind of watched that hybrid dedication to the church your whole life. But you said that you grew up and it was kind of a regular faith, whatever, but you had a turning point in your life that really began to happen around 1989. Take us back.
Yeah. I came to know Jesus when I was 6, what that looks like as a 6-year-old, but I knew I was saved. I knew who Jesus was, accepted him, and I've walked in that faith of understanding Christ for all my life. I would take anybody on, and talk about my faith. But I also went through a huge phase, especially in middle school and high school, where the church and my faith and who I was didn't line up at all. I just felt like a duck out of the water. I didn't feel like I was normal. I didn't want to put on a suit coat and a tie, and everybody said you had to. And I ain't going to do it. And I felt like I became this rebel, not by anything. Just wasn't natural for me. It didn't feel right. And when Lori and I got married young, went off to college and had my college wandering years, and then moved out to Sacramento in 1989, where a group of young 20s and 30 pastors, we started coming to this church. This was the first time they discipled me, but in a way that's not the typical. You think of discipleship, we're going to sit down, open up our Bible, and look at a scripture,
right,
talk about it. They discipled me in life living ways of just how they just loved life. They loved sports. They were active. They were hilariously funny, and it fit in the context. I like that. I'm a light guy. I'm naturally that way, and so yeah, there's times to be serious and get down to business, and so I was awakened to this group of people like, I can love Jesus, laugh my tail off, go out and play sports. And they started to model how my love and passion for Christ could be done in a daily life, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I don't think you're alone in that, Jeff. I think a lot of people is at least the image or the style, I don't know if you want to call it a style, the image of Christianity, of like, this is what it looks like to really follow Jesus. And if you don't fit that more serious, like you're saying, suit, coat, tie, serious all the time, thinking about deep spiritual things all the time, like, if you like sports, if you like to laugh, if you like to chill out, like, it's like, oh, well, you're probably not very spiritual. And I think a lot of people exclude themselves from the joy of walking with Jesus and the uniqueness and the impact of their calling because they don't fit the mold. But that didn't stop you. You kept pressing through that. And then you found people that gave you an imagination and let you see it for what it could be. Yeah,
exactly. And that really was them modeling that and hanging out. Then eventually I started doing some discipling where we were opening up the Bible, but I honestly didn't even know that people were pouring into that level. Like, it was never said, let's sit down and learn scripture. Like, it just happened naturally. And I started to grow and my faith and my got much larger, and it was a long part of my story and just my call. I never had a call, Darren, where so many pastors these like youth camp and God showed up and I was at the altar and I got called into full-time ministry. I've never had that. I never had that. I just saw I had two in a church that I was passionately in love with that didn't have a middle school or junior high program at the time. I had a great high school thing going on. And I was concerned for them going to that age group. And I just basically said, I want to start this junior high thing. And I scared to death. I mean, in college, when I was getting my master's in architecture, I was teaching college kids, college level courses. I was afraid to sit down with 5th and 6th graders and talk about Jesus. Like, I was like terrified, And so what I did is I said, all I know is I know how to spell Jesus, and I know enough about the scriptures I can find a couple of things. And I just got creative. Used some books for a while, then eventually just started doing my own thing and studying the scripture. And then we always tied a lot of humor and a lot of fun. So I took my DNA, brought it into the quote classroom of the Sunday, Wednesday experience, and God blessed it numerically. And from 95 to 2008, 13 years, I did middle school, high school ministries, and that's where I got to know youth through camps and all that.
Yeah.
I had the greatest run of my life. My daughters pouring into their friends and seeing so many people through that. So
One thing I think is crazy is,
it
Jeff.
was just kind of more stepped in.
What's crazy to me is when I first met you, I remember, it was like Jeff's the youth pastor, and you had like a huge youth group, and like awesome things were happening, and it was super legit. And I'm like, oh, he's a youth pastor. And then someone's like, no, he's actually an architect. Like, he's not even like full time. Like,
yeah,
it was just crazy that it's like you had responded to, and maybe this is what people need to get their mind around, Jeff, is that you had responded to the greater call of like, you're following Jesus, you serve others, you step into to do whatever he's asked you to do because that's part of the deal. It was like a greater understanding of the call that we all have within the kingdom. And it was like you said, you didn't have like like my story of calling, right? It's like between freshman and sophomore year of high school, they're praying about full-time ministry, feel like that's what God's telling me to do. And so that's what I went after. But you responded, I feel like, to the overarching general call of life, a life of servanthood and ministry that I feel like people need to hear more of, because it's like, it's not, I think maybe people feel like if they don't have that cliche story or that moment, then they just must be, I guess their deal is just to attend or just to kind of show up. But
yeah,
you just jumped in and you created an amazing youth ministry, and through that changed the lives of, through the years of hundreds of kids. And have you ever thought or just imagined, Jeff, like, what if you just wouldn't have? What if you had just said, well, I'm not called, I'm not special, I'm not, a pastor guy, I'm not going to do it. Have you ever thought about what would have been lost in that?
A lot of people know, and a lot of students know in Jesus. I know that. I mean, they might have found him through other avenues. God's always seeking and calling out his people, but especially with I'm more, I guess, more than me, where my daughters would be at, where they, what Dinette, because that I had the privilege, and I know you and some other people did too, like where your youth ministry years was some of their best friend. My girls' best friends were in youth group, not at school. They had school friends, but their world. And when you can create that, it's hard to create and hard to keep. It was blessed. So I think that was the biggest, win for me. I can't imagine. I can't imagine what I'd be doing today. And it really came down to some people trusting me. And this is the big thing I preach as far as leadership, trusting me to step out when I, quote, didn't have the degree or I didn't have the ordination. All these words we're using that I don't see in scripture anywhere. And I understand structure and the reason why we hold each other accountable for what we're teaching. But for me, it was like, thank you to those guys who trusted me to step out and gave me the opportunity. When I walked in there one day, says, I want to start a junior high ministry. And they didn't say, give us a 5-step plan. I said, go for it. Let us know what you're doing. And, and they met with me and we walked through it and they trained me well. But yeah.
Jeff, you talked about that it took you a while to get to the place of trusting yourself, almost, of knowing that it was okay to be you, which I think is interesting. You talk about sensing that, in your high school and maybe those early college years of like, man, I don't fit that, but I'm me. But it took you a while to come to the place of being able to trust that, like, it's okay for me to be me and to step into who God has called me to be. And just because I'm not like everyone else or not the norm, that's not a negative, and it doesn't disqualify me. Talk a little bit about that process of coming to the place of owning, like, it's okay and actually imperative that I be me.
Yeah, I had a lot of different. Early on in the early years, I had parents that would come to me and say, "Hey, do you really need to play games? You need to do that. Like this, you only get them for an hour, or whatever it is. Like, they need to be in the scriptures. And they didn't realize how much scripture and how much time we were spending, but it was being done in a creative way that a junior higher would keep their attention, not like them as an adult. And even had some people saying, hey man, now that you're called into ministry, you need to give up that architecture. You're called, like people, if you're truly that way, you should go off to seminary. You should do that. And I just said, that might be right for you, but that ain't right for me. That's not what God's called me to do. I'm just going to baby step this along the way,
One of the things that I hear, Jeff, as you're talking, and I remember you said, in those early years, you felt like you were, like maybe a little rebellious or you felt like you didn't fit. And one of the things that I know is we've spent some time going through, spiritual DNA and understanding who God's created you to be and finding that God has created you. Your call and your voice in God's kingdom is you're an apostle or a pioneer. You might even, you could use another term, could be an entrepreneur. And one of the things that's interesting about pioneer apostles is they most often don't feel like they fit because they can't get in line with the status quo. They don't want to necessarily build on the foundations of other people. They want to take new land. They want to start new ideas. They want to go after and begin new things, lay new foundations. And I think a lot of people, if they don't at first understand that within them, they're not necessarily rebellious, but they're created to be rogue in some ways.
Yeah.
They almost feel like this kind of personality doesn't fit with Christianity, but it's just the opposite is that Christ was the ultimate apostle. He was the ultimate pioneer. Like he is the firstborn, right? Mm-hmm. He is the first innovator in the greatest ways.
Yeah.
And what was that process of you for you, like going through and realizing, no, I'm not a rebel. And it's not that I don't fit. It's that I've created uniquely with a unique calling to be more apostolic, to be more of a pioneer, to be more of a rogue.
Yeah. Well, it's super hard. And it's even hard right now with COVID-19, the dynamic of slowing down. I, as an apostle, want to throw everything out. Here's the chance, start over. No one's going to remember when we all come back.
Right.
How we used to do it, And so I'm processing that too, not just for change, but it's like there's a whole unique way of, we've talked a lot about the church. We need to recreate who we are. So for me, it's hard to be patient. As an apostle, I think it's hard prophetically. Prophets really struggle with patience. Like they're seeing something needs a change in their voice in it, right?
Yes.
But really, the greatest gift I have is my wife, who is a pastor shepherd, who balances me really well when I'm out there. And she's gotten better at letting me get out there and dream big and talk a lot, verbalize things. But she has really helped me realize, as an apostle and as prophets, because you're kind of out there, you can't forget the people. You can't forget the people that need to be shepherded and pastored and loved. Yes. Not that apostles and prophets don't love people, but we're not there every day. I know you go through that too personally. It's like, you can't forget about people that are in your pews or just that need Jesus, that they are not going to accept this. So that's why there's 5 gifts given out. And if they're done right and unified in Ephesians 4:11, right? We talk about that. It's a big part of my life and yours too. Yeah. If those are handled right, not just for 5 leaders, but in the whole church. And that's part of my big thing now is we are all called into those 5 levels of leadership.
Yes.
Apostles, prophets, those who don't know, preachers, teachers, evangelists, and did I hit them all?
Yeah, you got it. Yeah.
So anyways, I just preached on this 2 weeks ago, Darren. People in their homes are gifted in these different levels, and they should be using them. Yeah. And we'll be held accountable for those even in our own homes or in our schools or in our work, right? It's not just made for Sunday morning. So I think I tangent it off. So that for me as an apostle, that's where I have to be balanced.
Yes.
Listen to those pastors, shepherds, and teachers that are, and sometimes they need to get pushed, right? Like, come on, guys, let's take a couple baby steps out of this box.
Yeah, there's an interdependence, right? Where it's a push and pull with each role that then is able to encourage one another. And I love what you said because this is a biblical concept, but it's so much bigger than what works in the church. It works everywhere. Every good team that I've ever been on, whatever context it is equally represented with apostles, prophet, evangelists, shepherds, and teachers. And I love being able to use, the terminology from, Giant Leadership and their 5 voices. They talk about the pioneer, the creative, the connector, the nurturer, the guardian. If the biblical words get scary to you, but if you're a leader and you lead a team, I don't care if it's a basketball team or it's an architectural team or you run a team of plumbers. If you have a business and a group of people together, helping people understand that unique calling and then learning how you interdependently lead together is, if you're looking to have a dynamic team, you have all 5 of those represented and trust each other and lean into each other, because those are the 5, archetypes of calling and vocation that God has given us as He's created us. And
Yeah.
Jeff, for you, was this difficult to get? Because your guys' churches had been around for years before you became the lead pastor. And I think it's unique that the church said, okay, yeah, you can keep a full-time job running an architectural firm and you can be our lead pastor. How did you get to that place for the church to go, yeah, we'll trust that. We don't need a traditional guy that's here all the time?
Part of it that I had to explain to some people, because I was with you down in LA in 2008 when God called me. I had no intention of being, I had just stepped out of youth ministry.
Yeah.
Was going to take a break when Deb and Alan Hirsch were down on a conference, and God gave me a vision for the church. And I just came back and called a few friends and said, I do not want this. And my wife did not want that either, but called us together to do this. But it works really well for us because I'm very horizontal in my leadership. I'm a releaser of people to do their job. And horizontal leadership works really well for letting people do their jobs, but it gets messy. Vertical leaders that, have to have their hands in everything can kind of feel handcuffed for many, but usually the structure is really solid. Like everybody knows their positions and it looks great. As a horizontal leader where I trust people out there, and I have a pretty big staff for a, average sized church, I let them do their jobs. And I told the people, you have to trust me. I will lead you. I will preach. I will be here. But I'm not going to be sitting at a desk Monday through Thursday and taking Friday off, because that's what we do, as pastors. You're going to get me some oddball hours. You're going to get me at all times of the day, but I will lead this group of people and I will release them to do their jobs. And it's worked really well for us. So, and a lot of that has to do uniquely for us is that Lori, my wife, is there every day.
Yeah.
She has the pulse of the people. Again, that's what she's about, the people. And with Brendan McCurdy and Mark Moore and, all of our youth and, children's pastors, we got a good team, right? They're doing their job.
Yeah. Well, what I love about it, Jeff, is I know that if more churches could get their mind around it and trust it, and I think if more apostles could get their imagination around their role, is that there are many churches that are dying for lack of vision and courage to go after new things. Mm-hmm. And there are apostolic leaders who feel like, and I know this is what I struggle with, is if I were to go to a church and be like, you want me to be your church, you want me to be your pastor, where I'm going to be here and nurture and develop all the deep relationships and all, like, it feels like a cage to me, and I can't do it. Yeah. So it's like, well, I can't do that, therefore I can't serve in the church. No, if you could trust the way that God has created us in the unique callings, you could step in and go, you know what, I can bring 1/5, right, of the leadership that's needed. And it's very needed and necessary if we're going to actually see ourselves advance to where God's taking us. But that is my role. And then here's the cool part about it. And I think this is the beauty of what you've gotten is that, the mass majority of your financial, life is through your job. You're a gospel patron, right? Like you're able to give your life back to the church in such capacity, and then create an opportunity for the church to have more staff, because that's not your one deal. It's a unique way to do it, but the innovation there opens up the opportunity to have more people ministering to a group of people.
Yep. Yeah, you hit it right on the head, bud. That's so true.
Well, Jeff, let's talk about one of the things I know you're passionate about is we've talked a little bit about leadership, but about leaders who get into a place where they start hurting people, and people that have come into relationship with the church, whether they were youth leaders or whatever, but they've experienced pain at the hand of immature leaders. And that's something that's a passion point for you. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. It's kind of like one of those things. If you could write a book to the church today, what would you write?
Yeah.
Type thing. And I would write. I just know so many people that have been hurt by the church. Usually leaders, not always. There are dysfunctional things that happen with people all the time, but just poor leadership that have led people astray through all kinds of different ways. Have hurt them mentally, spiritually, sexually. That's the big one that hits the screens, on TV, but it's not most people aren't gone from the church because of that. They're gone from being abused or whatever. And so my heart breaks. And I, as a leader, and I know for you, Darren, we say, sorry, we didn't do it. But as a part of the church, God's church, Jesus's church, we say sorry. And I will spend my life helping those people try to find health. Because is there anything sadder than those who knew Jesus and had every intention of being a Christ follower and was on this journey, and they got, my brother is one of those. My brother saw a horrific church split when he was like 18 years old. And he's now in 68, whatever he is, years old. He's almost 70, never been back in the church. Mm. Why? Because he saw a group of people act, and treat people disrespectfully. Like, that is so sad to me that, really, bro, your whole life you've ran because of a few, so try to get him reconnected with Jesus and what it was meant to be. So my heart breaks, and I just say, I'm sorry for that people that went through that. And my other high horse, if I could write a book, would be the last 25 years, Darren. You got many people you're going to think of when I talk about this, that I am so sorry for those who had a call into ministry that many went off to Christian, schools and got their degrees and went into leadership roles with pastors that just either two things happen. They used and abused them. And this happens, I see, usually in larger churches. They just wear them out. I'm going to use this guy, get him out, gal, get them out of here. Or they're just left out there to rot. Like, do your thing, and no discipleship and mentoring and no growth. And so there's these two huge extremes, and we are paying the price. I have many friends that say most of their friends they went to seminary with are no longer in ministry. Or at least, they've walked away. They're all selling cars or doing whatever. And it breaks my heart. And I, Lord, hold everybody accountable for that. He says in scriptures, he's going to hold us accountable for those things anyways. But my heart breaks. My heart breaks for those things.
I heard a stat this week, Jeff, from, it's a study, I guess, by Ed Stetzer. And it was a church, a pastor from a church here in Indy, that a church of well over 10,000 people. And he shared it with me that he said that right now, and some of this has been stirred up by COVID, with everything that we've all processed through in the past, in 2020. But he said nationally, the stats are right now that they interviewed and said that 90% of senior pastors in America right now are contemplating leaving the ministry.
Oh.
And when he shared that with me this week, it's just kind of stuck with me because that's a massive number. Massive. And I've talked to a lot of my local church pastor friends who have said, if not that quote, they've said, this has been the most difficult year of ministry in my life because I've been attacked and accused of things more aggressive than I ever have before. I mean, so many of them are, they had to close their church, and half their church, told them they were a sellout for that, or they started to try to open their church to minister to people, and half their people were like, you're going to kill everybody. And then you add on racial tensions and everything else, and just we're at each other's throats. And it's just such a difficult environment. And my heart breaks for that. And I know that you're voicing that same thing. And it's just such a difficult thing. And I think it must be so much of the fact that God has called each and every one of us, and it doesn't have to look the same. But if we could learn to collectively share the weight of leadership and servanthood, there's a beauty and there's a genius in the way that God has created that. But I feel like some of this, maybe God's in it to help us realize that in so many ways we've been doing church so upside down and it's finally
Yeah.
taken the toll on so many leaders. And if we could free people to become who God's created them to be and get rid of some of the hierarchical leadership stuff and embrace more of what you guys are living, people would realize, wow, I don't have to hold the weight for everybody. I don't have to be everything to everybody. I need to be who God's created me to be, whether that's full-time, whether that's part-time, whether that's apostle, whether that's prophet, evangelist, shepherd, teacher. But the way we're doing it doesn't seem to be working.
It's not, that's so funny because I think, so many of when people think what they expect to have, they want a teacher preacher. That's the number one thing. I'm drawn to sometimes worship, but there's this teacher preacher, this dynamic. Well, when you take that dynamic, and for those preachers and teachers that no longer have the platform of an audience, that not necessarily in a bad way, but that brought them great joy, that they almost don't have an identity without the crowd. And so it's a time for all of us people that enjoy getting up and preaching on a Sunday morning and hearing the amens and the claps and the altar gets, whatever that is, that dynamic. When you don't have that, can you still walk with Jesus and be okay with who you are without that one thing? And that, again, goes back to the thing we've been preaching forever, that, the church right now is not sitting in the seats. It's in the world. And see, as pastors have to figure out, okay, how do I fit? How do I fit?
Jeff, what would you say to someone? I know there can be, and we're talking more for people that may be in the ministry context right now, but growing up in the church, my dad was always bivocational. Sometimes he was like tri-vocational, right? He had 2 or 3 jobs to try to pay the bills because our churches were really small. And that thought that oh, well, if you have to be bivocational in ministry, you're probably not very successful. You're probably, once your church gets big, then you can do it full time. It's kind of the second class guys are bivocational. You flip that on its head because you're like, yeah, I'm bivocational, and I'm like, this is an honor and a joy and a gift back to the church. This is working beautifully. What would you say to somebody who maybe right now they're in that bivocational role, but they feel like they're somehow less than because they're in that kind of role?
They're not. That's their calling, and they need to stick to their guns when everybody tells them they shouldn't. I mean, bivocational ministry, what makes it super hard, and for those who are questioning, is that this is the key thing for anybody who's in bivocational ministries, even those, not just pastors, those who are heavily involved in teaching or any level of the church, Sunday school class, I don't know, teaching kids, is that you are never content. What I mean by that is when I go to work on Monday morning at J+ Architects and I'm doing architecture, my whole time, I'm constantly thinking, man, I should be at the church. Man, I need to call these 5 people. Man, I think about this that happened this last week. There's this dynamic of need of being there. And then when I'm doing ministry, my mind's like, man, I got this project. I got this deadline. I got to get this design done. I have a fitness center client texting me 4 times. Where are you at? So there's always a little bit of angst going on. And for some, I've told people, if you can't handle that angst, you probably can't be bivocational because you're just going to be really super sad. I am very high energy. I don't require a lot of sleep. Require more than I used to, but I don't, I have the personality that fits a bivocational model. Not everybody fits that way.
Sure.
Other thing, if I could throw anything out there, Dan, it was really good for me, is that my bivocational roles was with my kids for all those years doing youth. So I kind of felt like I was pouring into my kids in the youth ministry while I did it. So I didn't have to leave them, because I would also really encourage those who make sure you do not forget your family. You don't want to get done and have this great church or this great ministry or this great run at a company and your kids don't even know anything about you. So have somebody in your life holding you accountable to that, because that is the saddest thing.
Well, Jeff, you've done it. It's not been all a bed of roses, but you've done it. Your wife still loves you. Your kids still love you. Your grandkids love you, and your church team adores you. And I don't know, Jeff. We don't know what 2021 looks like. We don't know what the church is going to look like going forward. I mean, you guys are in California. You're just barely opening up right now. Here in Indiana, we've been open, longer, back to doing services. But, many churches are seeing the attendance, at a 30 to 40% coming back. And who knows what the future looks like as far as what the size of a church can be, or what the size of the staff of the church can be. And I wonder if with the way things look, is if what you have done, if you won't become a leader that will show hundreds, if not thousands of leaders, an expanded imagination of how to have impact in the workplace and also to have great impact in the church. And I love the fact that you still don't fit the traditional picture of church life, because if you fit the traditional look of it, we would miss a glimpse of, I think, what God is doing in the future. And that's why I've always loved being your friend and being around you, buddy.
Oh, thank you, bud. Thank you, Darren. I appreciate that. And if I could if you speak any propheticness into me, if I could end my last 15, 20 years, if God gives me, years of life, I would love to be a part of that, turning that page and really retraining what the church is going to look like moving forward, because it's going to be more bivocational. I just feel that it is, and there's a lot of books out there on different thoughts on philosophy. That's a whole nother conversation, but I would love to be a part of that movement, that conversation.
Well, Jeff, I love it. You're not just a message about it. You are living it out. You are the messenger as well, and the medium in your life. And I love you to death, man. You've made such an impact in my life. You're a constant inspiration to me, and I'm excited to continue this conversation. As we see where God takes it. But
thank you.
Love it. If they're listening, Jeff, they have a question. Maybe they're right where you're at, or they've sensed God calling. They say, you know what? I've never had, like you said, the youth group calling, but I feel like right now, like my church needs me, maybe my civic group needs me in some way, and I feel like I need to step into a leadership role that maybe I don't feel trained or called to, and they would want to reach out and get some encouragement from you. What's a way that somebody could get in contact with you, Jeff?
Oh, they can email me. I'll give my church. It's jjennings at faithlegacychurch.com. So it's my first initial, last name, JENNINGS at faithlegacychurch.com. Send me an email. I put my cell phone out there, but I don't want thousands of calls, Darren.
Let's just stick with email.
Hey, I'm going to turn the pages on you, brother. I love you, and I love your family. And, I follow a lot of your things. I've done a lot of the different Enneagrams and different things that you've trained, and you're passionate about. I love your heart. You're one of my favorite communicators out there. So I continue to pray and ask God to give us ways to keep doing ministry together, even though we're in different states. May God use that. It's my prayer. But I do love you and your family and all that you're doing out there. I'm proud of you.
Thanks so much, Jeff. It means the world, man. And let's keep creating the future together, buddy.
Okay. Hugs and kisses.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff.
Okay. Thanks.
And we're back all the way from Sacramento, California. Jeff Jennings right here, episode 19 of the podcast. And here's the question. I asked Jeff in the interview, but what if Jeff would have said no to the opportunities that God gave him? What if he'd have said no? And here's actually the bigger question I want you and I to talk about is what happens if you do? I know Jeff personally. I've watched him walk this journey. And the reality is, like I said in the interview there, like thousands of kids' lives, his whole family has been changed. Like he's making an eternal impact in this world and wakes up every day full of joy that he knows he's stepping into his calling. He's helping other people reimagine the way they could live their life with God. And all of that could have been stopped short if he would have just been like, well, I guess I don't fit. I guess I'm just a weirdo. I can't do the church thing the way everybody else does the church thing, so I guess the church thing's not for me. I'll just go be an architect, make my money, make myself happy, have a good life. And Jeff would have had a good life. And I guess I could say there's nothing, well, I don't know. I think there is something wrong with just having a good life. Because if you listen to the podcast and you're a follower of Jesus, is once we say, you know what, I'm going to follow Jesus, he's going to actually be the Lord of my life. He's going to lead my life, meaning that his teachings, his example, his spirit are going to lead my life. Then just living a good life for you, not an option. Like when he invited us in, then he gave us a commission. He gave us a mission. And he said, therefore, go and make disciples, right? Teach them everything I've taught you, baptize in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Right. And he said, and keep doing this to the end of the age. And I'm going to be with you. Like that's the command. So we don't really have the option to go, I guess I don't fit, I quit in God's kingdom. And here's the good news about that is that you don't want to. Like if you're listening to this podcast because you want to be awakened to become who you were born to be, you don't want anything less than that. You really want like a C- life? I don't want a C- life. I don't want to show up because here's the deal. I'm not trying to be like crazy or scare you. I'm just going to be real. Someday like this all ends, right? And then we have to go and talk to Jesus. We stand face to face. And guess what? Everything that you discover in the spiritual DNA course, everything we talk about on this podcast, everything that people, that their stories they tell about using the gifts and the abilities and the talents and everything God's given them, all these are gifts from God. And here's the deal. One day we're going to stand face to face to God and he's going to ask us how we did. What did we do with all the good stuff that he gave us? And I know in that part, I don't want to show up and be like, gosh, you know what, God, I didn't feel like I fit, I was a little different. I just couldn't, I couldn't get down with the way that people did church in my town. So I just quit, but I worked hard. I made a lot of money. Like I don't want that for me at the end of my life. And I don't want that for you. I want you to wake up every day and be full with joy and excitement and everything that Jesus says comes with following him on this mission with him. Right, that we would actually overflow with joy, that we'd have life, we'd have it to the full. And I hope that listening to Jeff's interview today, that it's beginning to expand your imagination of this and maybe even destroy this kind of secular, sacred divide. And if you listen back to the interview we had with Ray Hilbert just 2 weeks ago, I think it was. If you haven't listened to that episode, I think maybe it's episode 17 possibly. Go back and listen to Ray's interview because you're going to find common themes. I feel like last month was like the theme of what are we going to do about the world's greatest problems? And I feel like this month's theme is all about helping us destroy the sacred, secular, false thought that those are two different things, because they're not. If you're following Jesus and his Holy Spirit has brought you to life, we talk about this in spiritual DNA, right? You're participating in the divine nature. Everything in your life is now spiritual. So whether you're a carpenter or you're a missionary, your life is sacred and everything you do follows what God's doing. I love the quote that Ray gave us in his interview when he says, listen, I'm a kingdom builder cleverly disguised as a fill in the blank. Because here's the truth, guys, is God's kingdom is advancing and the forceful men and women will take hold of it and they will advance with it. And the question is, are you going to keep pace with God's kingdom and his call in your life? Because here's my concern, and Jeff talked about this, and we're going to get a little churchy in this episode because here's the deal. If you're listening and you're a follower of Jesus, we're a part of this thing called the church, the body of Christ. And personally, I've had a great wrestling match with the church. I've been a local church pastor. I didn't want to be a local church pastor. I didn't feel like I fit as a local church pastor, and I still don't. And part of that is because, as we talked to Jeff, is I know God's called me. I know he's created me as an apostle. I'm a pioneer. So to put me in a traditional, what people would say, the way it fits there is you got to be a real shepherding, caretaking kind of person to be working in a church. And nothing about that appealed to me from childhood. And it's almost made me walk away from my calling until I was able to lean into, discover my spiritual DNA, going, okay, wait a second. Maybe it doesn't look like that, but can I have the permission to be me? And here's the good news I want you to hear today. You have permission to be you. And the core element of a first step of really understanding who you are is first and foremost to understand that you're dearly loved by God. You're a child of God, created in his image. And then the next thing I want you to discover is, are you an apostle, prophet, evangelist, shepherd, or teacher? What's your role on God's team so you can become comfortable and begin to gain an imagination of who you are and what he's called you to do. And here's what I think Jeff's talking about is this idea of church. Like I said, I've struggled to fit into it, but here's what I keep coming back to is that the church is God's family. The Bible called it his bride or his body. And so Jesus is really passionate about the church. And I really believe that the church as a collection of believers, all of us on this mission with Jesus, we are the hope for the world. It's Jesus' sacrifice and the community that comes to the church. And so if you're growing up right now and you're at a place where you're kind of like, I'm cool with Jesus, but I'm not really cool with the church, that's a problem, right? Because it'd be like you and me hanging out and you being like, Darren, I'm pretty cool with you, but your wife, she kind of sucks. I would be like, whoa, we're probably not going to hang out a lot, right? Because that's my wife. And so there's not really an option for us to be like, well, I'm cool with Jesus, but I really don't like the church. Because I'm cool with Jesus, but I don't like people. Well, if you don't like people, you're going to really struggle to live out your calling, because guess what? Your life is relationships and everything else is just the details. And you're not having a relationship with yourself. That's called loneliness, right? You have to have people in your life to live out your calling. And one of the things that I think may be happening is I'm wondering in the church right now is we don't have the option to throw it away. We don't have an option to just dissect and deconstruct where it has problems and go like, yeah, we don't need that. That doesn't work. But right now, what we're seeing in our lifetime is we're all hoping, we're recording this episode at the end of 2020. We're hoping, and we keep, saying, I can't wait till 2020 is done and gone, because we have hope that 2021 is going to be crazy and awesome and better and vaccinated and whatever else, and there's going to be no corona. We don't have any kind of guarantee of what life looks like in 2021. And one of the concerns I have, if you're an American Christian listening to this podcast, is I'm concerned about what happens when the possibility that like big box Christianity doesn't work anymore. Already across the nation, right, all mainline denominations are declining or plateaued in attendance. And right now we have a situation where I attend a church that has about 400, 500 people in it. So we have been able to continue to gather because we can social distance people and stuff and blah, blah, blah. But churches here that are the big box churches in our city, they can't gather because they have 10,000 people. And so it seems even just kind of weird to try to have a couple services where maybe a couple hundred people come when you really have 15,000. Well, here's the problem. Is I don't know in the next couple of years how many of those big box type superstore, mega churches continue to make it. Like many of them are over leveraged in their debt right now. They don't have the offerings they need to pay. Like, I'm just wondering, what is God doing to us? Because we don't see a massive phenomenon of huge big box, mega church type of church culture around the globe. And where the kingdom of God is most forcefully advancing and God is doing amazing things, it's a lot of places around the world where either Christianity is illegal or you're not having your huge 15,000 person church. And I wonder for you and for me, as we just start dreaming about what could be going forward, is it God leading us into something to say, hey, when big box Christianity no longer is an option, like, do you know how to do mom and pop Christianity? Like, do you know how to follow me when maybe you're not able to go to church every week with the big, awesome show with the smoke and lights and the 20-foot, projection screen? Maybe you do, but I think a lot of people have struggled this year to know, how do I be me in God's kingdom if it doesn't happen on a Sunday morning and all the traditional roles that I would think about going to church? And we've got to move down that road, because here's one of my things that I'd love to see us destroy. There's a thing called the Pareto Principle that says that 80% of the work is done by 20% of the people, and most organizations and churches are included in that. Also, that 80% of the money is given by 20% of the people. And I talk about this in the Spiritual DNA online course, that for a long time when I was a pastor, I would try to use that stat to make the 80% feel guilty about the fact that they weren't doing anything. But then I began to realize that we have created a church culture where we only really recognize about 20% of the gifts of God's kingdom. Right? If I talked about, and as Jeff talked about, understanding being an apostle, a prophet, evangelist, a shepherd, or a teacher, we really only have a space for shepherd teachers in the church. So if we need those 5 parts to make up 100% of God's kingdom, but we only have place on the field for 20% to play, then no wonder the 80% are sitting on the sidelines, because no one told them that there was a place on the field for them. And that may be where you're at. You're like, you know what? I'm not a pastor. I'm not a teacher. So you know what? I guess I can't be me. I guess I can't fit within God's mission, within God's kingdom. That's a lie. And I hope that listening to this interview with Jeff begin to expand your imagination to realize that you have permission to be you. The first step in that, right, is discovering who you are. That's why I want you to go take the Spiritual DNA course. Go to spiritualdna.me. Buy the course, go through it, join our Facebook group so we can grow together and begin to realize when you say, I want to be okay being me, you know what you're actually saying, because you know who God's created you to be. And you can step forward with the confidence and the power to say, I'm going to show up and be me today in my work context, in my family context, and in my church context. And maybe if you're a part of a local church where they don't value all of God's calls, you may need to find a new community where they will give you permission, like Jeff talks about, more hierarchical, set of leadership situations where people say, I see God's gifts in you, I see God's call in your life, and I'm going to give you opportunity and space to walk into that. Or maybe not in the regular way that you see church. It could just be in your life and you leveraging ways to how do you show up and love and serve people like Jesus in every context that you're in. So as we move forward, here's the questions I want to ask you. Do you know what God has called you to do? And do you know who you are? I want you to move forward with the confidence to say, it's okay being me, even if I don't fit in traditional roles. But I know who God is. I know who he's created me to be. And I know what he's asked me to do. If you're at a place where you don't know what God has called you to do or asked you to do, you don't know what your mission is, like I said, first and foremost, discover who he's created you to be. Discover your spiritual DNA. And then begin asking God, what have you called me to do? And then start paying attention. Because I can promise you this, when God finds a heart and a soul and a mind and a strength, a child of his that is dedicated, that is educated, that is ready to go, he does not waste that opportunity. And he will open doors, he will open windows, he will blow your mind by giving you opportunities to actually step into opportunities to serve, opportunities to create, opportunities to mold, guide, and to direct, to become who you were born to be and to advance your life along within his kingdom. And it's a great adventure. I hope you could hear that as you're talking, hearing Jeff talk, and his joy of leading his company, of leading this church. And if things don't change much in 2021, who knows? If mega churches are a thing of the past and we can't just gather and hear some guy talk, he may be calling you within your architectural firm or as an accountant, stay-at-home mom, a teacher, maybe in a political field, a designer, an artist. I don't know what you may be in your job, but ask God to expand your imagination to see how you might reinvent the way to see his church and his kingdom move forward. He's got an imagination of what the future looks like. He's got a vision of it. He's got some blueprints for it, and he's looking for people that he can entrust with those plans. Thanks again for listening to the Darren Lewine podcast. I pray this episode was inspiring, was awakening, was equipping to you and for you. And would love to hear from you. Send me your emails. Send me to it, Darren@blackbirdmission.com, or reach out to me on Instagram or Facebook, or you can always send me a text at 317-550-5070. Until we talk to you next time, remember, God is near you, not far. God is for you, not against you. And God has created you on purpose and for a purpose. Thanks for listening to the Darren Lewine podcast.